Blog Talk Radio, the world's largest online radio network.
Well, welcome everyone to the Week 1 FantasyGuru.com podcast. No, I am not John Hansen. I'm Adam Caplan, and we're here. It's the regular season. We've already had one game. We'll talk about that on a rare Wednesday night. And my broadcast partner from NFL Films, he's the executive producer of the NFL Matchup Show on ESPN, Greg Cosell. Greg, welcome to Week 1.
Adam, so it's you and I on the podcast. Wow, this will be awesome.
How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like John is so swamped with work this year. He asked if I'd be willing to host it with you, and I said, of course, absolutely, before I go to practice every Thursday at the Eagles complex at the NovaCare Center. So, Greg, let's get started. Did you have a chance to see last night's game at all?
Yeah. You know, I watched most of it. You know, these games that start at 8:35, 8:40, Adam, for a guy in his advanced years like myself, man, these are late starts.
I know. I'd rather him be like 7. I totally agree with you. You know, the one thing that stood out to me is the value of coaching. If you know, in the first half, I thought especially the first quarter, the Cowboys' offensive line struggled in the interior with pressure, and I thought Collinsworth did a good job of pointing out that they had Romo stop taking 7-step drops. He went to 3 and 5, and you just saw he started to have time, and boy, did they take advantage, Greg, of the injuries in the Cowboys secondary. The first thing I actually wanted to talk about is DeMarco Murray. I know he's not a special guy, but I have to tell you, I continue to be impressed with this guy. He's been a little bit better than I thought he'd be.
Well, it speaks to, I think, what we've spoken about with him is we talked about this last year, and I think it surprised all of us. He runs very hard. And I think that's what's, it's funny because I wouldn't call him elusive, and there were a number of runs where you saw him pretty much have some space, but he kind of just put his shoulder down and tried to run through people.
Right.
And he's more naturally powerful, and I think he runs with a little bit of an edge. And I think that's what stands out. I mean, look, that long run was a phenomenal run. That's just one of those plays, and you have to give him credit. That's not going to happen every week. So you almost have to separate that, even though it's the reason he gained all the yards in the game. But I think he's a much more physical runner than I thought he was coming out of college, and he even showed that last year, and I think it popped up again last night.
Yeah, and the big surprise in the game was Kevin Ogletree, who is their third receiver. Now, I think part of his 8 catches for 114 yards and 2 touchdowns had to be with the fact that Jason Witten clearly was not himself. He did start the game coming back from his spleen injury, and he took himself out. I think he missed like half of the second quarter. They used him a little bit to block. He only, I think, had 3 passing targets. But Kevin Ogletree, Greg, is a guy that has been given every chance, and it's been really, honestly, it's failed up to this point. And then he has this breakout game against an injury-depleted secondary. Over the years with Kevin Ogletree, have you seen anything that was noticeable with him?
Well, it's funny. I went back this morning just out of curiosity and looked at my notes when I did him coming out of Virginia. And I can't remember. Was he a draft choice or a free agent? If he was a draft choice, he was late.
Yeah, undrafted free agent.
Okay. And the notes that I made, as I said, has a chance to be a very good third receiver. And granted, this is his 4th year in the league, so it hasn't happened up to this point. And I think we have to be careful about putting too much stock in last night because at the end of the day, the Giants were playing with almost street free agents in their secondary. And
right.
But the bottom line is, he's certainly going to continue now as the third receiver. The Cowboys like to go 3 wide. Every team does. And Romo has a pretty good history of using his third wide receiver. So if Ogletree continues to play well, he's going to catch balls. Just a quick aside about last night's game, and then I know you want to move on.
Yep.
And I was just talking to one of my guys here, and I was kind of aggravated with myself for not mentioning it just in general talk beforehand. But I think the Giants have some issues with their back 7. And I think that's been camouflaged because we know at times their front 4 can be, unblockable.
Right.
But I think they have issues in their back 7, and I'm anxious to see how that plays out.
Well, obviously, they ended the game with 3 out of the 4 top corners out of the game. I mean, that, obviously.
But, what's interesting is, with Prince hurt, and granted, he's supposed to start, and, now this is the second year he's been battling injuries, so we'll see how that plays out. But keep in mind who they put on the field. Michael Coe played, He's basically a journeyman.
Then
when he went out, it was Tryon, who's probably been with half the teams in the league. So, and that's not a knock on him. I mean, God, the guy's had a very nice career. That's terrific. But, I mean, what they're putting out there is pretty much, not good enough quality.
Right, and they had to play third-round pick Jaron Hosley late. Yeah, the end of the game was 3 corners. That's not going to work. Now, I think when we look at the Giants' offense, I think there were a couple things that were noticeable. They, too, had some issues with pressure. Sean Locklear had a start. I thought that was a problem for Will Beatty. And I think you've told us for a couple of years, yes, they've been together for a while, but, Craig, when I watch their line, I don't think they're the most athletic group, but what do you think about their line?
No, I agree. I agree with that. And, I don't think they were terrible. I mean, look, it's funny. I forget who I was speaking to yesterday, and somebody asked me about the Sean Locklear matchup and, with DeMarcus Ware. And I said, look, the Giants know that too. So they're not going to let that happen consistently. And I know Ware had a couple of sacks, but, I mean, it wasn't like that he was one-on-one with Locklear. Right. And, Collinsworth did a great job of pointing out how the Giants were stemming their tight end to make sure that there was someone in front of Ware, not just the tackle, on most plays. Now, nothing's 100%. You can't do it 100% of the snaps, or you can't run your offense. But the Giants were certainly aware of that.
Your biggest disappointment of the game, David Wilson, who had 7 fumbles.
Yeah, and he never saw the field again after that.
Incredible. 7 fumbles. I didn't realize this. At Virginia Tech as a junior, lost 4 of them. And as you pointed out, Wilson fumbles a bad one in the first half, and the only thing they let him do after that was return a kick. Then they actually took him off kicks.
Yep.
But the thing that I've always liked about him is his explosiveness and willing to be physical. But I'll tell you what, without him in the game, we love Bradshaw. He's a fun player to watch, but he's more of a grinder. They don't have that speed when he's out of the game. I definitely think he impacted their offense when he was not on the field.
Yeah, and it's interesting because look, Caplan, when he took him out, obviously the game had a lot to go, and you don't know whether you're going to win or lose the game at that point. It'll be interesting to see going forward whether that was Caplan's way of teaching the kid a lesson, because the kid's a super talent. He's a better all-around runner than Bradshaw, and they know that too. This is not news, but the bottom line is Caplan is certainly old school, and you can't put the ball on the ground in big games. And while it may have been the first game of the season, it was a big game. And you will see how much he, they play that's who Dallas plays. The Giants, I think, play Tampa next week. It might be. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, how much Wilson plays next week. I mean, obviously they've got, it's almost, they've got a long time to prepare for that game now.
That's right. Finally, before we get out of here, the one guy I did want to mention on the Giants, and we've talked about him over the years, not a lot, is Martellus Bennett, the tight end. You talk about, really how they had to use him as a blocker, but I'll tell you what, he could run. He's a guy that always had talent, but they use him a lot as a blocker in Dallas. When you watch this guy on tape, what did you see?
Well, he's always, Adam, even going back to when he was drafted, he's been a big, talented guy. I mean, not quite like, a Jimmy Graham or a Jermichael Finley, but for a man that big, because he's sort of a bigger body, like he's got a little more girth to him, he moves extremely well. And he's never quite, for who knows, I remember when we did Hard Knocks with the Cowboys, I think it was his rookie year, and you may remember this too, and, you could tell he didn't quite get it, right. So I don't know what goes on in his head, but I think if he continues to play well, he becomes an important piece to the offense, because you saw how Eli likes to throw to the tight end. I mean, look at Greg Ballard last year, and he's not a big-time talent. He's a little better than people think, but he's not Martellus Bennett. So, Bennett could become a big factor in that offense.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, let's move to the Sunday games, and Andrew Luck's first game at the Bears. Greg, how tough is it for a rookie quarterback? We know that Luck's a pretty smart guy, but how tough is it to go against this pure cover 2 defense of the Bears?
Well, again, it all depends on how much the Bears play of that. They might not play that on first down in against base personnel. They tend to play it a lot more in must-pass situations. To me, Adam, the big issue in this game for the Colts is the individual matchups of their O-line against the Bears' D-line, particularly in nickel. Because what you're going to get, I assume, this is what they did in the preseason, but everything changes, is they played McClellan, the rookie, at the end in their nickel, and they brought Adonijah inside where he's a very good pass rusher. And I think the Colts' O-line is a work in progress right now. In fact, in the preseason, they played 2 guards who I'm not sure will be their starting guards. I don't know what their depth chart looks like exactly.
I'm looking at it.
I thought Costanzo played pretty competently a left tackle. But other than that, I think they're kind of a work in progress on their O-line.
Yeah,
Samson Satelli did not have a good preseason in pass protection.
Okay.
So this is going to be an intriguing matchup because this is not a high percentage blitz team, although they'll test luck. They'll blitz. Now, it might not be the creative blitzes like Pittsburgh or the Jets, but they'll blitz because you always test an inexperienced O-line and a young quarterback with it. But, they're not a team that just says, let's go get them.
Right, and they have actually 5 offensive line changes from last season. It's
right.
It's quite an undertaking for a rookie quarterback. Greg, here again, we don't know, we never know for sure what a team's going to do based on the preseason. But to me, I would think they'd want to get Dwayne Allen and Kobe Fleener on the field quite a bit this season. Yeah, because they just don't have a deep receiver core.
Well, I got to tell you, and again, now this is just watching preseason, so all I'm doing is really speculating. Mm-hmm. But Donnie Avery came back, and again, it's not like he's Jerry Rice, but I mean he's got talent. Donnie Avery, T.Y. Hilton had a very nice preseason, I thought, and I kind of liked him coming out of college in a certain role. They still have Reggie Wayne, a very professional receiver. Even the kid Brazil, did okay in the preseason. Again, I'm not suggesting it's a top 5 receiving core, but it wouldn't surprise me if these guys are a little better than people might think.
Greg, looking at the Bear offense, and obviously the key is protecting Jay Cutler. When you look at guys like Alshon Jeffrey and the addition of Brandon Marshall, is there enough here for this team to move the ball on offense?
Well, I'm very anxious to see Jeffrey once this regular season starts because he didn't play a whole lot in the games in the preseason. He played in the red zone and he played some snaps in the field, but he was not playing, a ton of snaps with the first unit. So again, that could all change come Sunday, but that was not the case in the preseason.
Yeah, so now we'll get a better look. And finally here, I don't know if you saw him in college, Evan Rodriguez, 4th-round pick from Temple.
Oh, yeah. The Temple kid?
Yeah, let's talk about him.
I liked him a lot. And obviously in that offense, I think he ended up catching 30, 35 balls, but he was kind of a multi-dimensional tight end, H-back, fullback at Temple because I watched a number of Temple games because of Bernard Pierce mostly. And so therefore I evaluated Rodriguez. I kind of like that kid. And, again, what that means, how he's used, how many snaps he plays, who can say. But I think he's got a chance. He's a pretty athletic kid now.
Right, and they've talked him up, and for people who play fantasy football, I think it's a guy that you need to keep an eye on because he's an H-back, as Greg said. He's a guy they're going to move around a little bit. So, again, we don't know much about how they're going to use these guys on offense, especially the rookies. But I'll tell you what, let's look at the first couple games, and we'll probably get a better idea.
Yep.
All right, let's move on to the Eagles at Cleveland. Greg, we've already seen this game. It's really incredible. Just over 2 weeks ago, the Eagles played at Cleveland. They'll play there again. And looking at Cleveland, I think the key was very simple in that game. They just could not handle the Eagles' speed. When you look at Cleveland's offense, is that kind of what they're going to have to do, handle the Eagles' speed on defense?
Yeah, it's hard for me to think that Cleveland will move the ball offensively. Again, let's leave Trent Richardson out because he's a total unknown. He's never played in an NFL game. As much as I love him, he's never played in an NFL game. Brandon Weeden, we know he can throw. That's his strength. He's a very good arm talent, but you watch him on film, and you and I have talked about this, he's a little slow. He's a little measured. He's methodical. He's got some issues with his footwork. And the thing that was really strange to see in the preseason was how poorly Joe Thomas played at left tackle. If you did not know that was Joe Thomas, you would have said, that guy looks like a free agent. And both their tackles did not pass protect well in the preseason. Schwartz, the rookie, at right tackle, and Thomas. And, the Eagles just throw out a whole group of really good pass rushers. And for those who did not really look at the Eagles closely in the preseason, I know you do, Brandon Graham looked like a different guy. He looked quick and explosive. Phillip Hunt is a guy a lot of people don't talk about. He's an explosive edge rusher. And these aren't even the starters.
I know.
So it's hard for me to look at that side of the ball and feel like the Browns are going to move the ball. Now, because Weeden can throw it, because they've got big physical wideouts, they can make a play or two, but I can't see them sustaining offense.
Yeah, so what Greg's saying is, for your fantasy players, don't start them against the Eagles. Just real quick, Trent Richardson, when you studied him in college at Alabama, did he seem to you like a definite 3-down back?
Yes. Absolutely. I thought Richardson was a complete back. He caught the ball well. He knew how to pass protect. He's physical. Trent Richardson, to me, and is a terrific. I thought he was the best player in the draft, but that's me. But again, he has not played in an NFL game, and I don't care where he played. It's like the Western Kentucky coach this week in preparing because they're playing Alabama. He said Alabama could beat 5 or 6 NFL teams. I mean, come on, you have to be on serious drugs to say something like that.
Yeah. Real quick, when we look at the Eagles' offense versus the Browns' defense, the Browns' defense, Greg, last season was very, very opportunistic. They were very stingy, but you just don't see a lot of great players now. In this game, Phil Taylor's out. He's obviously very good against the run. 2 of their starting outside linebackers are out. So, to me, I think the Eagles should be able to move the ball here. I don't think there's any question about it.
Although the Eagles have some issues on the O-line. I mean, you watch the tape, and they don't have a left tackle who's really a quality NFL left tackle right now. And, there's 2 guys who on that D-line for the Browns who, first of all, they played a ton of snaps last year, and Sheard and Rubin, who are good football players. Maybe not dominant guys you talk about when you talk about the best guys at their position, and Sheard was a rookie last year, but these are pretty good football players. And, this is a defense that's, it's not dynamic. It's not a high percentage blitz. It doesn't necessarily create a ton of turnovers, but it's not a bad defense. Now, is Joe Hayden going to play this week?
Yeah, he is. Joe Hayden will play because the way it works is if the player's not suspended Tuesday, the league does not want any player showing up to practice and being pulled off the field because he's suspended. So, yeah, Joe Hayden is going to play this.
Because he's a good football player now. But again, I'm going to be very anxious to see because we know Michael Vick's tendency to run when he doesn't need to run and when he sees color and the slightest bit of pressure. And I think he could see some pressure from this group.
So you think that, Cleveland actually, this might not be an offensive fest for the Eagles this week. It just sounds like the way it's
again, Michael Vick's hardly played in the preseason.
Right.
Now, Michael Vick is one of the most difficult players for me to analyze because there's any given week where he could make 3 plays outside of structure that are unbelievable. That can happen. But if they don't happen, sometimes there's no consistency or stability to their offense.
Right, so we do need to mention this. So if you're going to be watching the game, the key to the matchup for the Eagles offense, at least the passing game, Jabal Shear, the left end, versus King Dunlop, who, Greg, let's face it, I think you could get away with him for 3 to 4 games as a left tackle, but Greg, 16 games, I think that's an issue.
Well, you know as well as I do, Adam, because you're close with the Eagles, that they're sorely disappointed in Bell. They expected him to easily win that job and be their left tackle. And, we sit here on the matchup show, and Barrett Brooks works with us on the matchup show. And, obviously he knows offensive line play. And, Bell was a tough watch. And Dunlap, like you said, Dunlap is what he is.
All right, let's move on to the next game. And this ought to be very interesting. The Patriots at the Titans. And, Greg, when we look at the New England offense, we know it's coming. It's that those 2 tight ends. But the guy that I was so impressed with, I think we talked a little bit about this last week, was in the 3rd preseason game, Stephen Ridley. We know that they're sort of a shotgun team. But when I look at the Titans' defense, it's no longer a great defense. I'm not really impressed with what I've seen from them in the preseason. If the Patriots wanted to go with Ridley, Greg, let's talk about him. What do you see from him? Because I think he could be a very good football player in this game.
Well, I like Ridley a lot, and I know that we talked last week or the week before when I gave you my notes, which, of course, I'll be doing all year for fantasy, but I did it in the preseason, and I had made the point that I thought he could be a volume sustainer as a back. Now, the Patriots don't necessarily run that kind of offense, but I think he's a very, very good back. He's got inside power. He's got enough lateral agility to make some people miss, which we saw in the preseason. He even got to the perimeter on some outside zone runs with a little more quickness and speed than I thought he might have. And again, I'm not sitting here telling you he's Arian Foster, but he's a good back. Now, again, how will the Patriots play? But here's the issue. When you're the Patriots, you line up with Ridley, Hernandez, Gronkowski, Welker, and Floyd, okay?
Floyd, yeah.
Theoretically, you've got 2 tight ends on the field. Theoretically, right?
Right.
Okay. If you're the Titans, how do you match up personnel-wise? Because that's the first thing you got to decide. Are you playing base? Are you playing nickel? How are you going to match up personnel-wise? And the thing that makes the Patriots so tough is from that personnel package, they could line up in almost any formation because any player there could line up in any position and be effective.
Right, and I think, playing to your point here, I think that they would line up a nickel, and the problem is they're really thin at cornerback. Ryan Mouton is their nickel, is coming off 2 injuries the last couple of years. I think that's a problem. And, Greg, the other problem for the Titans, and I know the Patriots' offensive line wasn't great in the preseason, though, the Titans, Greg, they just don't have great pass rushers. This is no longer the very good Titan defense of past years. I think that the Patriots, Greg, I think they should have no problem scoring in this game.
Yeah, although, again, that's why it's so hard to know from preseason to regular season, because clearly they struggled a bit in the preseason. And, look, they're a team that's been through all this before. They know sort of the flow of the season. I would probably tend to agree, but just a little caveat that I'm anxious to see it.
Real quick on their offensive line, Greg, did you get the chance to see them? Because they've got 4 offensive line changes this season, and we
You're talking about the Patriots?
Yeah, we saw what the Bucs did to them.
They had a really hard time with the Bucs. The Bucs pressured them on the inside in particular, which is the way teams want to pressure Brady anyway. But I think with the O-line changes, teams are going to attack the O-line as well, and they did struggle with that against the Bucs in the dress rehearsal preseason game. It was very, very evident that the Bucs, with their whole approach, whether it was just pressure or blitz, they attacked inside.
One thing on Ridley, is he a guy who could catch the football at all? I don't know if you've noticed it.
I think we have to wait and see on that a little bit. I don't think he's bad, but, again, he hasn't done it enough. I don't feel like I have a good handle on that one way or the other.
All right, let's get over to the Titans offense. And I'll tell you what, unfortunately, Kenny Britt's not playing this week because he's suspended. But with Kendall Wright and Nate Washington has really established himself. And Damian Williams, who did a good job last season when he had to play in LaVelle Hawkins as the slot guy, and Chris Johnson and Jared Cook. I look at this offense, Greg, and they could score some points, but you've seen the Patriot defense with their changes.
They made some changes, yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Titans offense versus the Patriots defense.
Well, the Patriots have done some stuff in the preseason. Again, with Belichick, you never know, but, they had a lot of snaps where they would have just 2 down linemen and 5 guys standing up. Chandler Jones, Ninkovich, a lot of guys standing up. I think Belichick's looking for ways to rush the quarterback. I think it's going to be a different defense. Again, now the secondary, which has had some struggles in previous years, I'm anxious to see how they perform. And I think there'll be plenty of snaps where the Titans put Locker in the gun and spread them out, and they'll see how the Patriots match up. The one thing about the Titans is they do have a pretty solid O-line. Those tackles are pretty good. They can pass block one-on-one.
Jared Cook's a guy we don't talk a lot about, but to me, and historically, the Patriots have struggled in coverage. You've seen Jared Cook a lot.
Yeah.
He's on the final year of his rookie deal. I think this could be a game where he gets the football.
Yeah, I remember him coming out of South Carolina, and I thought just ability-wise that he kind of reminded me a little of Shannon Sharp, just a physical ability-wise. And, last year, over the last 8 or 9 games, as fantasy people know, he really started to come on, and he made plays down the field because this kid can run. So, to me, and again, now he's playing with a quarterback who's a clear work in progress. That's just the best way to describe it. So it's hard to know. But I think if he was playing, let's say Hasselbeck was starting, I would expect Cook to have a big year.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. The one question, though, we have in this game, because a lot of people have asked John and I, Jake Locker against the Patriot defense. Remember, Greg, years ago, the Patriots against the younger quarterbacks would sort of confuse them, but things have changed. Obviously, the personnel is a lot younger. What do you think about Locker in this game?
Well, I think Locker has his own set of issues that he has to work through that are totally separate from who he's playing against, because he's got some issues that prevent him from being consistent at this point. And there's 2 main ones, and these are the subtle disciplines of the quarterback position. And I've talked about this. Locker has a tendency to climb the pocket for no reason, step up into the pocket. So what he does is he moves himself closer to the pressure for no reason. And the other thing he has a tendency to do is drift on his drop, which makes it hard on his O-line because they don't know exactly where he'll be. So he does 2 things in a sense that pressure himself for no reason. And that's why he ends up being very much of a random player at times, but he can bail himself out at times as well because he's very athletic.
Yeah, and you have to be careful for people who are in leagues with when you lose interceptions. He's going to throw some because he's willing to take chances what you like, but he's so inaccurate at times, Greg. Remember,
he's going to leave plays on the field, Adam. He'll make some that are great, and he's going to leave a lot of plays on the field.
Right, 54% passer in college, not very good. All right, let's move to a very interesting game, Atlanta at Kansas City now. Very impressed with what Atlanta has at these skill positions on offense, it's always tough to play in Kansas City, Greg. I think they have a very interesting defense. Now, the one issue for Kansas City is Brandon Flowers missed the entire preseason with an injury. He's coming back here, and they've added Stanford Rout, they have Jaleel Brown and Javier Arenas. Greg, let's talk about the Falcon offense versus the Kansas City defense. What do you see here?
Well, Jaleel Brown started in the preseason opposite Rout, and he had some struggles. And I guess, is Flowers going to start?
He's expected to play. I don't know because he hasn't played in a while.
Because Brown struggled, and he was the kid who played opposite Jimmy Smith at Colorado in college, and he's actually got a lot of physical ability, but he clearly struggled in the preseason. So we'll see how that, because obviously you're going to have Roddy White and Julio Jones, and if you're going to struggle on the outside, you're going to get beat. And the thing about it is with the Falcons is they can throw the ball well out of their base personnel, and that means that you're going to have Glenn Dorsey on the field, Tyson Jackson on the field, two guys who can't rush the quarterback at all as 3-4 DNs. So now you've got Tamba Hali, and the guy who's critical for this defense to take the next step is Justin Houston, because he's the other outside linebacker who, when you watched him in college at Georgia, you said, wow, this guy could be a special pass rusher. Now he's got to, this is, I believe, his second year, he's got to become that guy for this defense to work in its base 3-4.
Greg, with Julio Jones, did you notice on tape if they're moving around to create matchups? Because you just talked about Brandon Flowers, who missed the preseason. He might not be in great shape here. What did you see from Julio Jones on tape in the preseason?
Well, look, I'm not going to say anything that other people haven't said. Julio Jones is a big physical kid who can run. And everybody's looking for a 6'3", 220-pound wideout with vertical speed. And while I don't think Jones is explosive in the same way, let's say, A.J. Green is, because he's the guy he's going to always be compared to, there's no question he is a vertical receiver. And he's a very, very difficult matchup. And the other thing that he's very good at, because of his size, is he is run after the catch. They throw a lot of in-breaking routes to him. He's very willing to go over the middle. So what happens is if you hit him in stride over the middle, he can break tackles.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see if they match up Stanford Rout on him or how they could Stanford Rout's over 6'1". So we'll see how they well,
Roddy White's not a small guy either.
Nope,
so, that's one thing that the Falcons have going for them. They got two big wideouts. Jones is probably at this point in their relative careers a more explosive vertical guy than White, although White still, because he's a very good route runner, still can get over the top.
Let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs offense versus the Falcons defense. Jonathan Baldwin, if he doesn't start, still going to play a lot. Of course, you have Dwayne Bowe, Tony Moeaki, who's coming back from his ACL injury, and Charles and Peyton Hill is great. Let's talk about the Chiefs offense. How do you, when you play the Falcon defense, what's the best way to attack them?
Well, I think the Chiefs are one of those teams, not to cop out about the Falcons D, but I think the Chiefs are one of those teams that will have a pretty set identity, Adam, no matter who they're playing, because of their quarterback. I think that Castle is one of those guys that the only way he can really be consistently efficient is with a nice run game, with play action, with with functional space to throw the ball. He needs the other parts working. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean they'll never put him in the gun on first down, and, everybody does on occasion. But I think to really maximize his efficiency, and you go back 2 years when they won the division, and he had very good numbers and was a very efficient player, that's what he is. They have to play to the strength of their quarterback. They're going to be a running team. Now, the advantage they have, assuming Baldwin comes on, they have Baldwin and Bowe now, we're talking two big physical wideouts who both can run a little bit. Both have vertical ability, and they'll be a shot play offense. They'll go play action, and they'll look to get these guys, especially when they're playing against single high safety, which is what a lot of teams will play against them on 1st and 10, because the run game, they're going to look to get Bowe and Baldwin on route combinations that attack single high, and it'll be down the field.
And when we look at the Atlanta defense, we should mention Corey Peters, one of their starting D tackles, is still out. He's going to be out a while. So, playing to Greg's point, that Kansas City's going to try to run the football, but when they throw it, I think Jonathan Baldwin, Greg, before we move on to the next game, when you've watched him on tape, is he a guy who could get downfield?
Yes, he can. Now, again, the thing about vertical receivers, everybody focuses on 40 times, which, you know how I feel about that, Adam. We don't need to talk about that. Baldwin can get downfield vertically. He's, and the thing about tall receivers like that, and he's 6'4", they eat up grounds, and I've had to come to learn that watching tape, because when I'd watch tape of college guys and transition them to the NFL, I'd see tall guys who aren't necessarily fast, and you say, oh, he's not going to run well, and then then I've learned over the years, wait a second, these guys, they take 3 steps and they're 15 yards down the field.
Calvin Johnson was the first guy. It's so funny you said that. When I first saw Calvin Johnson on tape, I was like, is he really that fast? Because it looks like he's a long strider. And then when you get to see these guys play live, when they run by people, it's actually pretty cool. It was a great point that you made.
I mean, especially when they have free access, when they're not pressed. These guys, with free access, like a Baldwin, he takes 3 steps, and it seems like he's 10, 12 yards down the field already. He's already eaten up the cushion with an off-coverage corner.
Right, and the Falcons have 3 veteran corners, so it'll be very interesting. This should be a really good game. I don't think it's going to be very high scoring, but I just think it's very intriguing. And don't forget the inclusion of Dexter McCluster on the offense finally, so at least they're finding a way to get this guy involved.
I'm anxious to see how many snaps he plays, because with Bo, Baldwin, and Breston, which is a pretty good top 3, and McCluster's a very interesting player, but I think that's going to be, and obviously you're talking for fantasy people, I'm going to be very anxious to see how many snaps McCluster plays this week.
Good point. All right, let's move on to Jacksonville, Minnesota. 2 young quarterbacks, 2 sophomore quarterbacks. Blaine Gabbert, who, again, you're not seeing, it's not like he played 10 games in the preseason, but what I saw from him was so good as far as staying in the pocket, letting plays develop, and showing that strong arm he had. Greg, this game is at Minnesota. It's indoors, and it will be loud. But I think with Justin Blackmon, I know Robinson was quiet, but they also have Mike Thomas, Mercedes Lewis, Greg. If Gabbert is willing to stay in the pocket, Greg, I think there's some plays to be made here.
Well, they're going to obviously attempt to do the same thing they did in the preseason. 3-step, 5-step drops, ball come out quick. They want to make sure that Jared Allen is neutralized. And there's many ways to neutralize a pass rush. You don't have to put 2 or 3 guys on him, because if you do a preponderance of 3- and 5-step drops, you can single block him because he's not getting there by the time the ball's out. Now, the Vikings know this too. So the question is, will they squeeze their defense and really condense their coverage to take away the quick throws? To me, that's the real chess match in this game. How the Vikings play defense, because Gabbert and Mike Mularkey did a sensational job in the preseason to restore Gabbert's confidence. It was all quick drops. But as you and I discussed, there were a few times where he sort of had to stand there and throw it, and he did. And he was a much, much improved player just based on the preseason.
Right, and I look at the Vikings secondary. They're not real deep behind Winfield and Chris Cook. So
who do they have listed as their starting corners right now?
Yeah, it's Winfield and Chris Cook, and then they're so light in depth. They traded for A.J. Jefferson, who used to be with the Cardinals.
Who really struggled last year and lost his starting job in Arizona.
Right, and they have Josh Robinson as a rookie. So I think if they could protect Gabbert, and we talked about the options there, I think he could get some things done. I'm not saying use him for fantasy, but
Cook is a coach's nightmare, because he's had all kinds of issues, as you know, but as a physical talent, people look at him and go, this kid could be a really good NFL corner. But, he's obviously got some issues, but he's big. I mean, he's 6'1.5", 6'2". He's lanky. He can run. He moves well. He should be a very good corner, but it hasn't happened yet for many reasons.
All right, let's go to the Viking offense versus the Jaguar defense. And we've talked about this the last couple of years. Other than Percy Harvin, not a lot at the wide receiver position for the Vikings. So I got to think, Greg, that they're going to get Kyle Rudolph, who's sort of my breakout player of the year here, more involved this season. When you see Rudolph, what is he going to add to this offense?
I like Rudolph.
Yeah, let's talk about that. And also, in your film study, do you remember the Jaguars covering the tight end very well? It's a tough call, but
I can't answer, so I don't want to speculate and be wrong.
Let's talk about Rudolph. That's fine.
But I think Rudolph, he moves exceptionally well. People are probably not aware of him because he was a rookie last year, and obviously Ponder played and was very up and down, so Rudolph didn't really shine. But I think this kid moves really. I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's exactly Rob Gronkowski, but I think that there's elements of that. He's not quite as physical. I mean, Gronkowski's 275 pounds.
Right.
Rudolph is not, but Rudolph moves really, really well. He's a lot more fluid than people who haven't seen a lot of him will be surprised. Now, again, because Ponder is still a young quarterback and he's a work in progress, I think Rudolph's numbers from week to week will vary greatly. I don't think we can sit here from a fantasy standpoint and say, you can pencil him in for 5 for 70 every week.
Right.
There might be some weeks he catches 8, and there might be other weeks he catches 2 for 12 yards. But that's a function of a lot of things.
Right, but I also believe that because they just don't have a lot of options in the pass game, he's going to have to get the ball. Now, John Carlson's there, too. He's a guy earlier in his career who was actually a pretty good football player. We'll see. He's come back from a sprained knee. We'll see how he does.
And they're going to play a lot of 2 tight ends.
Yep. Toby Gerhardt probably going to be the main ball carrier, at least for this week. Greg, you saw his tape in the preseason. How did he look?
I think he's a downhill runner that's what he is. He's got some power because he's a big man. But that's what he is. He's pretty much a guy who just takes the ball and runs downhill. He's not a skilled runner. He's a big man with power. He runs hard and physically, but he's a limited runner. I think if you have to play him for 2 or 3 games, he's fine.
Let's move on to Washington and New Orleans, the first ever game for Robert Griffin III. This is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to this because, Greg, you know how tough it is to play in the Superdome in New Orleans. This is going to be an interesting ball game. Now, the Saints have some guys injured at linebacker. We know they've got changes on their coaching staff because of suspensions and so forth.
What's the Curtis Lofton status? Do you know?
I think he's going to play. I think Hawthorne's a little bit farther away, but we'll find out later in practice.
Because obviously they were playing Casillas in the middle in the preseason once Lofton had the high ankle. And high ankle sprains, I played basketball and I had those, and they don't heal so fast.
No, they don't, and that's going to be a question because they thought they had great depth at linebacker. Now it's been hurt by
Casillas struggled in the middle in the preseason because he's not really a Mike.
Yeah, he's a weak side. Casillas is, I think, under 230 pounds, so that's clearly going to be an issue for him. So let's talk about this Redskins offense. I know they've got 3 backs. No one has any idea who's going to be the main guy this week, but if you're the Redskins, how do you attack that New Orleans Saints defense?
Well, I think Shanahan's a guy that has an identity. I mean, look, he's certainly going to try to attack weaknesses. And the reason I asked about the linebacker is because the middle linebacker, because I think if it is Casillas, you'll see a lot of boot action. Because with boot action, you always get a backside crosser, and often it's the middle linebacker whose responsibility it is to find that backside crosser. And I think because Casillas hasn't played a lot, and in the preseason he struggled with that a little. One advantage, and we were actually doing this in the matchup show on Sunday, the Snickers NFL matchup show, is don't forget they played the Houston Texans in the 3rd preseason game in the dress rehearsal game, and very similar offenses conceptually, Houston and Washington, because Kubiak was with Shanahan for 11 years in Denver. Right. And I think you're going to see designed movement, boot action with Griffin. He's comfortable getting on the perimeter and throwing on the run, and if it is Casillas, that puts a strain on Casillas in terms of recognition and reaction at a position that he's not played a whole lot. So that's why I asked you about Curtis Lofton.
The one guy that we kind of liked, I mean, Pierre Garçon is I've never called him a supreme deep threat, but he could run for a guy his size.
Oh, yeah.
Have you kind of noticed the chemistry that Griffin and Garçon have? I know
they
working
ran
on it.
Garçon a lot of deep routes in the preseason. They're obviously trying to develop that chemistry, and I think they'll probably continue to do that. Obviously, the Saints' defense is different under Spagnuolo. It's going to be more zone. It's going to be more zone blitzes as opposed to all-out cover zero blitzes. So it's a different defense than what we saw the last 2, 3, 4 years under Greg Williams.
Greg, there's no way we could quantify the loss of Sean Payton this season, and Pete Carmichael did call a handful of games last season, but you face a Redskins defense. They play a 3-4. They are actually a pretty good defense for the most part last season. Let's talk about the Saints and how you think they might attack that Redskin defense.
I think the Redskins defense is pretty good, actually, and a guy who I really liked last year before he got hurt, and I liked him coming out of college, Clemson, and he's played very well in the preseason, is Jenkins, the D-tackle. Yeah. And Cofield's had a good preseason. This defense is pretty intriguing to me. The issue you always face when you play New Orleans is, we talked about the Patriots, is how are you going to match up to Graham? And look, I don't have any inside information, but I wouldn't be surprised if you see snaps in which D'Angelo Hall plays him man-to-man.
Really? Ooh.
Yeah.
That's because of his ability to run, I would assume.
And Hall's a bigger corner, and I think they feel like look, the rest of those wideouts. I mean, Colston's a good player, we know that, but I think they probably feel they can handle the other wideouts.
Yeah.
And by the way, there were snaps in the preseason, and maybe they did this in preparation for Week 1, in which Hall lined up at safety.
Oh, really? Wow. So
Yep.
That's interesting. So we'll see how. That's a great point, though, you made. Hall's really the one guy, at least, who could run, who has some size. And I think Greg makes a great point, because when you look at the Saint receivers, you're not worried about any of them, to be honest with you. Colston's an underneath guy. Henderson
it's a scheme thing. They're
right.
a scheme team, and I know I've told you this over the years, that defenses, when they prepare for the Saints, almost stop worrying about formations because there's too many of them. So defenses think in terms of concepts because they don't want to overload their players to try to figure out all the formations. So you try to deal with concepts as opposed to, where's this guy? Where's that guy? What if he's here? What if he's there? Because, you want your defense to be able to react, not to have to think the whole game. So I think that they'll play man. Look, Hazlitt is a blitzer, and they'll blitz. And you know what? They may get burned on a couple, and he may live with that. He may know that going in, but he also knows that if you don't attempt to speed up Drew Brees, you've got no chance.
And Greg, the guy that I think is real key to that blitz is when Darren Sproles is on the field, screen pass. I think there's some big plays to be made there, but watch.
And I think he's going to get creative in how he handles Sproles when he's in the backfield. You may see linebackers peel off and play him. You're going to see creative ways to try to play Sproles and Graham from Hazlitt, I think.
Buffalo at the Jets. We're not going to spend much time on this game. It's funny. So many people have made this point how Stevie Johnson's had his way with Revis. I always laugh at that. Yeah, he's the one guy that's actually made a couple plays. But Greg, let's face it. The Jets don't give up a lot of big plays in the pass game. To me, Greg, when I see
they're not going to, if they win this game, and a lot of people are picking them, they're not going to win because Johnson eats up Darrelle Revis.
Exactly.
I mean, he may catch a few balls, no question, but it's not like he's going to go 9 for 170.
Exactly. I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. The one guy, though, I want to focus on, and I thought he was tremendous in the preseason, Fred Jackson. I don't care if he's 31 or 21. He looks tremendous, Greg. To me, to help Fitzpatrick out, who does turn the ball over, I think they got to get Fred Jackson the ball. How do you, if you're the Bills' offense and you're Chan Gailey, how do you want to go against that Jet defense?
Well, that's a great point. 80% of Fred Jackson's runs last year came with 3 wide receivers on the field. So, that's what I don't think they're going to change that dramatically. I think they're going to look to spread them out. The other thing, too, is when you spread out the Jets, and this is all theoretical, but it's true to a certain extent, is you can define blitzes better pre-snap when you spread a blitzing team out, because at some point they got to show the blitz. If they want the safety to blitz, he can't come from 20 yards away and get there. He's got to show it at some point. So it's easier to see if you're spread. So I think that's what they're going to do. I would look for them to try to run the ball out of spread. I really would. I think Jackson is really good as an inside runner out of those spread formations. I could be dead wrong, but I don't think they're going to just start tossing it around. I think they're going to try to be pretty balanced in this game, even though they'll be in 3 or 4 wide.
Jet offense will spend 20 seconds on this. I got to be honest with you. Dustin Keller's hurt.
Is he not going to play?
Right now he's questionable.
Okay.
How in the world, and I know the Bills' defense is great, but they've had a lot of talent on that side of the football. How in the world, if you're the Jets, do you want to attack that Bill defense if you can at all?
Well, I think the Jets are stuck. I think they have to do what they do. Now, which is run the ball, which they did very poorly in the preseason for many reasons, too numerous to get into here, but let's just say they were poor at it. I actually think they're going to have to take some shots on first down. And when I say shots, I don't mean throwing it 40 yards down the field, but I think they're going to have to throw the ball on first down enough times to do some damage. They actually did that in, I can't remember which preseason game, it might have been Carolina. They came out and threw on their first 2 plays Sanchez actually looked very good on those 2 throws, completed balls, and I think they're going to have to do that. They can't just line up and run. Now, over the course of the season, they'll be a running team, and they're going to have to run a whole hell of a lot better than they did in the preseason, or they're not going to be a very good team.
Rams at the Lions, and Greg, the Rams are yet another team. A lot of offensive line changes, 4 of them.
Oh, yeah.
To be honest with you. So when I look at it, if they could buy some time, watching the line defense, they've got major problems at cornerback. You've seen Bradford in the preseason. How's he looked? And you've seen the line defense. Could the Rams actually move the ball this game?
Bradford's looked up and down. There have been because he's a very good arm talent. There are times you see him throw and complete balls, and you go, "That's Bradford. Boy, he can throw it." And there's other times he's been erratic, missed some throws. And my big concern with him, and they know about it because they've actually addressed it publicly, which surprised me. But the concern with him is cabin fever. What happens when the pocket closes down? They're going to try to prevent that. And obviously they've got Steven Jackson, but I think Bradford is very much a wild card as we go into this season.
Another wild card for the Rams, Greg, is Brian Quick, who I know you liked him, others didn't come in the draft, but when you look at the receiver core, Greg, not very good. It may not happen now, but eventually I think he's going to have to get on the field because he's got some size and he's got some ability. Greg, have you seen him at all in the preseason?
Yeah. I mean, and he's, again, I don't know how much he's going to play. We don't know that stuff. I mean, who's listed as their starting wideouts in their base personnel package?
It's actually, believe it or not, it's Steve Smith and Danny Amendola. So,
yeah.
To me, though, I think when you're looking for this guy's a second-round pick, he's got ability, and you like that. He's by far the biggest receiver they have. Greg, you've seen the Lions secondary. I mean, right now, first of all, Chris Houston is hurt. They're starting rookie Bill Bentley on the other side, and they have no depth at all. They cut Alfonso Smith. Again, I think if you could protect Bradford, because the Lions are going to be able to score, I think they might be able to put some points up.
Well, knowing Jeff Fisher, and again, now you're just trying to get into coaches' heads, and I hate doing that, but
sure.
My sense is they're going to try to shorten the game. They're going to try to run the ball, eat up clock.
Yep.
Cut down the number of possessions and snaps that the Lions have because their secondary's got some issues. I'm talking about the Rams. So that's going to be their approach. Now, that approach, if it doesn't work, that can go south real fast because if you end up starting out in your first 2 possessions and Bradford ends up being on 3rd and 9, you're going that approach goes south real fast.
Right.
So we'll see how it goes.
Right.
Whereas if you can run, then all of a sudden you establish a certain pace you want to play, and the game's different. But they're not going to come out and ask Bradford to start throwing.
No. But I'm just saying, if the plays are there, I think. I mean, if he gets time when he does drop back, I think he can.
See, I think the most intriguing player in the Rams' pass game is Lance Kendricks.
Okay. What did you see from him?
Because I think he's capable of beating both linebackers and safeties. He moves well. Now, again. These are all work in progress kind of things. These are unknowns, but I think he's a very intriguing player because he can run vertical routes from the tight end position.
Right, and don't forget Louis Delmas missing preseason. He's hurt once again. He's a free safety. So
yeah, and the shame for him is he's always hurt because he's a good player, but he's always hurt.
Right now, the Lion offense versus the Rams defense. Now you mentioned the corners. Cortland Finnegan's there, Janoris Jenkins. So they've got their 2 corners. Brad Fletcher's their nickel. There's clearly some talent there, Greg. Let's talk about that Lion offense now. When you look at it, they're going to hopefully get Ryan Broyles in this game. But I think, because they just don't run the ball, I still think they're going to be a shotgun spread kind of deal here. Let's talk
they are.
Yeah, let's talk about how, if you're the Lions, how are you going to attack that Ram defense?
Well, it'll be interesting because Finnegan and Jenkins, is Jenkins going to start? Is he listed as this? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
They're both press corners. And, we know about Calvin Johnson, and they're going to press him. That's what they're going to do. We all remember Finnegan against Andre Johnson a few years ago when he tried to get in his head, and he did, and Johnson ended up getting kicked out of the game. And, hey, as far as Finnegan concerned, he won that battle because Johnson got kicked out of the game. They're going to get in the face of these receivers. They're going to press them. The big issue comes Johnson, they do move around now. He does play in a slot. They put him in motion. When guys are in the slot, it's tougher to press. And you have the depth chart probably right in front of you. Who's their 3rd corner now?
The 3rd corner right now looks to be Bradley Fletcher. He used to be a starter. Now he's playing nickel.
Right. So it's going to be a very interesting matchup on the outside because, like I said, these guys will try to press, and you'll see the Lions take some shots over the top. They'll throw to Johnson on vertical routes here against press.
All right, final early game here on Sunday. We've got the Dolphins at the Texans. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this game. Why? Because, quite frankly, Greg, I don't see how in the world the Dolphins could score against this Texans defense.
Yeah, it's a good point. Although I got to tell you, I thought Tannehill had a very nice preseason. And again, I don't go by numbers. He's not working with very much. It's the O-line's a work in progress. He's got nothing at wideout, so the numbers are the numbers. But I'm just looking at quarterback attributes. I thought he had a nice preseason, and I think he'll end up being a good player. It might take longer because of the team.
Yeah, no question about it. And then when we look at the Texans defense versus the Dolphins, Texans offense versus the Dolphins defense, Dolphins going to a 4-3 here. I didn't think their defense was particularly great in the preseason, but we know what Houston's going to do. A lot of play action. Foster touched the football. They've got a couple guys I want to talk about because they're going to play a little bit more because Kevin Walter's getting up there a little bit. Lestar Jean and Keyshawn Martin. And I know Martin, you're a guy you really like coming out of the draft.
and he fumbled twice in that dress rehearsal game, but he's a good player. We'll see how much they use him. They've been using him a lot in the preseason with the first units.
One of the best games of the week, maybe the best game of the week, San Francisco at Green Bay. Greg, the thing about San Francisco, for the first time in many years, they actually have some options at receiver. They added Randy Moss, Mario Manningham, and A.J. Jenkins, although Jenkins may or may not play each week because they have depth. If you're San Francisco, I know they're still going to run the ball to help Alex Smith, but the Packer defense, Greg, last season had some issues. If you're San Francisco, how do you attack that Green Bay defense?
Well, I think they're going to, believe it or not, here's what I think is going to happen. And again, this is just, when I say think's going to happen, this could be on 4 snaps, but if you get big plays on 2 of them, it's big. I think they're going to make Nick Perry, who's the left outside linebacker in the base 3-4 for Green Bay. He's a converter. He's a rookie. He was drafted in the first round to help Clay Matthews rush the quarterback. He was a D-end in college. They're going to make him defend the pass. And one thing that the 49ers did exceptionally well last year, was a staple route for them, is the wheel route. And they got to it from different personnel packages, different formations, but very often the outside linebacker in a 3-4 is required to cover. They're going to do that. They're going to make Nick Perry cover somewhere in this game. Now, like I said, it doesn't mean it happens on 25 snaps, but they're going to do that. They're going to make Nick Perry cover. And they'll do it, I would guess, out of their 2 tight end package with Vernon Davis and Delaney Walker.
Interesting. So, on wheel routes, you could see Kendall Hunter in the game because he's fast. You could obviously see Frank Gore.
I mean, they've thrown wheel routes to Delaney Walker, to Vernon Davis, to their wideouts, to their backs, to their fullback. Bruce Miller, their fullback, caught a touchdown last year against the Redskins on a wheel route.
Wow, how about that? Okay. Now, Randy Moss, Greg, he didn't play a ton of snaps in the preseason. Is this a guy who could still run, or could he?
Yeah, I watched every preseason game, and that's hard to tell. He didn't play a ton of snaps.
Yeah.
I thought that just once or twice did he run vertically. He looked, it's so hard to tell, but he looked okay to me. I mean, I can't sit here and tell you he's the same guy as the 2007 Patriots, but he didn't. Here, I'll give you a perfect example. I think that Braylon Edwards looked slow in the preseason, and I know he made the Seahawks.
Right.
I don't think Randy Moss looks slow.
Oh, that's good. So he could still move. That's good. That's good to know. Now, Greg, when we look at other facets of this matchup here, I think I look at the Packers secondary. They've got issues. I mean, opposite Tramon Williams, they're going with Jarrett Bush, who's been a safety and a corner.
Yeah, and Woodson's playing safety in their base. So, again, you could see Woodson play Vernon Davis man-to-man in this game. Woodson's done that kind of stuff before, and he clearly can do it. So, they've got some options in this game as far as how they choose to match up, and that's why I mentioned the Nick Perry thing. I think I'll go after him. But you could see Woodson in certain personnel packages against certain formations play Vernon Davis man-to-man. Yeah,
and I think they'll go after Jarrett Bush because I think he's sort of a guy.
I would agree.
Who would have the bullseye. Now, let's look at the Packer offense here. Greg Jennings, Nelson, James Jones-Sustain, and Driver, and Finley, and now they've got – James Starks isn't playing this week. They've got Benson at Green.
Yeah, what's Finley's status? Because you've read a lot about him in the preseason, because without Finley, and I know he's playing, but I mean, there's been a lot of talk that DJ Williams has pushed him, and Finley, I think he lost a little confidence.
He's still the guy, he's still the guy.
He lost a little confidence last year. I think Finley, without Finley, and again, I know he's playing, but I mean, if he's not the guy that he was, I think their offense is a little easier to defend tactically because Finley creates so many problems just by where he lines up. So, again, he may line up and be fine, but that was the only point I wanted to make about that.
Right. The one thing I did want to mention, though, before we move on to the next game, and you'd mentioned it in your notes, Aaron Rodgers is a little off. I mean, I know the numbers might look good, but there was just a little slight hesitation. Maybe the timing, again, wasn't great, Greg. How do you think the 49ers might kind of break down? Because, remember, they also have had some offensive line changes, the Packers.
Yeah, I thought Rodgers was a little quick to pull it down in the preseason, which, by the way, that happened a bit at the end of the last season as well. And, again, this might be a nitpick, but just what I see on film. The 49ers, when they go to their nickel package, and, look, they don't take Willis and Bowman off the field. Alden Smith now will play more snaps. It'll be very interesting to see, since he missed a lot of the preseason because Harrelson's on IR and done, how the 49ers do that. Does Smith become the starter? Is Clark Higgins the starter and Smith stay as just a sub-package guy?
Right.
Because any time you ask a guy to go from playing 30 snaps a game to 60 or 65 snaps a game, I can guarantee for the coaches it's a question mark.
We're going to skip over Seattle, Arizona. Just the only thing we'll say is Greg pointed out, and I'm glad you mentioned that, looks like Braylon Edwards is going to start for Golden Tate, who's hurt, so that's obviously an issue.
What's Lynch? Is Robert Turbin going to start?
Yeah, well, right now, he's questionable, is Marshawn Lynch, and we've talked about Robert Turbin, and I know, Greg, you kind of
He was impressive in the preseason. Yeah. I liked him.
Yeah. Carolina, Tampa Bay, not much to say here. Now, the Tampa Bay defense, though, did give Tom Brady some problems in that third game because they actually game plan sort of. We'll see how they play Cam Newton and the Carolina Panthers. Got to talk about the Sunday night game, Greg. Pittsburgh at Denver. Pittsburgh's going to have Mike Wallace for that game, which is obviously very important. Antonio Brown had a great preseason, Greg. Rashard Mendenhall, how about this? He practices outside chance that he plays, but the bottom line is it's Roethlisberger and those receivers and obviously Heath Miller against that defense. How do you think the Pittsburgh offense matches up against that Denver defense?
Well, that's going to, again, this is a total unknown because of the new coordinator now that you get to a regular season game. I read a very interesting stat, and it really struck me. And, we know Roethlisberger's a very good player. That's not the question. But since the merger, in their first 8 seasons, only 3 quarterbacks have been sacked more than Ben Roethlisberger: Neil Lomax, Randall Cunningham, and Ken O'Brien. And that struck me because, at some point, Roethlisberger's just the physical punishment he takes will have an impact. At some point, we don't know what that point is,
right.
But, it could happen any time. It's almost like a fighter, I guess. You don't know when the fight is that he just doesn't have it anymore. And I'm not suggesting that's going to be the case, but it will happen. And I'm very anxious to see how they run offense. If Haley tries to make Roethlisberger play a little more disciplined, I don't feel like I have a great feel for what they're going to do.
Now, remember, Max Starks, believe it or not, is their left tackle. Mike Adams isn't ready. They lost DeCastro. He's going to miss most of the season, so he won't be able to play right guard. So they've got some issues here. I agree with Greg here. It's going to be fascinating to see how Todd Haley...
And on the other side, just because I know we want to move along, I think that you're going to see a very balanced offense. I don't think you're going to see the same run-pass ratio we saw in Indy and Manning's last 3-4 years when they clearly went to more than 60% pass. I think and I know they're playing Pittsburgh that stops the run normally, but I still think you're going to see a balanced offense unless the game dictates otherwise. I don't think you're just going to see Peyton, dropping back and throwing it. I thought he looked great in the preseason, but one thing did stand out. He didn't throw that many balls over 20 yards in the air from the line of scrimmage, and when he did, I don't think he quite had the same juice on them. So we'll see how that translates in the regular season and how teams play their receivers based on that once the regular season starts.
Yeah, and I think playing to your point, and just based on Ryan Clark not playing.
Yep.
Because I think Joel Dreesen and Jacob Tamme, and you saw them, especially Dreesen, involved in the red zone. I think that plays to that. And Decker on slants, and he's a guy they've developed a lot of chemistry with him and Manning. I'm fascinated to see the inclusion of these tight ends and Decker against Pittsburgh. I think
I would agree.
It's a good matchup. Yeah. All right, now we've got Monday night, San Diego to Oakland. The problem with Oakland, They might only have 3 healthy receivers. They're going to re-sign Derek Hagan because they've got all sorts of problems with injuries. San Diego, to me, I think it's, they're going to do what they do. But, Greg, without Ryan Matthews.
Is he going to play?
No, I don't think so, because the thing is he feels good, but he has not been cleared medically because it's unlikely that he'll get cleared. But let's say, for argument's sake, he's not playing. Greg, Ronnie Brown, to me, I think they're going to have to throw the ball a little bit more than they want. I know they'll still try to run the football, but good luck doing that with Ronnie Brown. I think they're going to have to attack the Oakland secondary.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch that simply because their pass protection, their O-line to me is a question mark as we go into this season. So, and Rivers, I love Rivers, and he'll stand there. I think he's the toughest pocket quarterback in the league. But still, no matter how tough you are, if there's a lot of bodies around you on every single snap, the cumulative effect of pressure eventually has an impact. And so I'm going to find that very, very interesting.
A great point, Greg. All right, Greg, great stuff. We didn't get to all the games. We do apologize for that. We'll be less verbose next week. All right, for Greg Cosell, I'm Adam Caplan. We'll speak to you next week.
Blog Talk Radio, where millions of hosts and listeners gather.